Hi, so we're live. What's up, Alejandro? How are you doing?
Hello, world. Sorry to repeat the joke, but I thought it was worth it.
Yes,
How are
you're
you?
a programmer.
It's good to hear you.
It's a good sign. It's a good way to let people know you know programming.
Yeah, it's my first time in a podcast. Yeah. You know, it's your first time in anything. That's the best thing to do. You know, hello, world.
But yeah, man, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for taking the time. I'm glad you've given the other episodes a listen, and I'm glad you've enjoyed it. And hopefully, we can up the ante and set a bar for episodes to come. Yeah, your expectations are very high right now.
Oh my! No, thank you for having me. I have to be honest. I didn't have the time to listen to all previous episodes.
Uh-huh.
But you know, the ones I did, they were very entertaining. So
Well, since you have not listened to all the episodes, I'm assuming we're going to have to stop this podcast right here. You're going to have to go finish up those, and then we can talk.
and come back. So
Yes.
okay,
And I'll be
back.
right here. I'm going to keep this Zoom meeting on till you finish listening to it all.
You won't even edit it. Okay.
No, it's going to play. I want to hear all your reactions, your quiet laughs, all of that. I want to capture all of that.
Oh my goodness.
But okay, we discussed this, but I think it'll be good to put it out there. It would have been infinitely easy for us to just talk about data science and stick to the standard topics. But I think we have quite a few interesting things to talk about today, and I look forward to your opinion on a lot of crazy things, a lot of things slightly out there as well. But,
exactly. My totally uninformed opinion, can be of value to our millions of listeners, I think.
Of course.
No, I agree.
It's going to be 5 listeners, out of which one is Bibek, other one is Marcella, and then the three are 3 unfortunate people who happen to click on this link.
Well, just give it time. You start with 3 or 4, and then before you know it. No, I agree. Actually, I agree. I mean, the simplest thing to do would have been to comment on the program we just finished, right? Business analytics and big data.
Yeah.
Which is not useless by any means, but it's true that it would have become,
boring,
quite restricted. When we started just brainstorming about topics,
we
very quickly became
smart cities.
Low priority.
Yeah. But anyway, before we begin, Alejandro, would you be kind enough to give us like an introduction? Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot because I'm worldwide unknown. Yeah, it's hard to introduce oneself, isn't it? Right. So my name is Alejandro. I am a civil and structural engineer. I did my undergraduate studies in Spain, and there's where I started working. But soon enough, I had the chance to move over to the UK, to London. That was a long time ago. More than a decade ago. So with the exception of an interlude in Germany and very recently Madrid, I've been in London all this time.
How long has it been in London?
Altogether, I think this is year 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, during these years, I've had the time to experience many different flavors of my profession, from design to on-site supervision, commerce and export of construction materials. That was in Germany. And then in time, I had the chance to go back to academia and be a doctoral and postdoctoral researcher.
Right.
And that's what I was doing up to last year. I was in a group called Computational Mechanics, Structural Computational Mechanics Group, which basically does simulations of different construction materials. Mm-hmm. Mine was concrete originally, and then I moved on to masonry for bridges. And then I decided to pursue a career change. And to that end, I joined a program at IE in Madrid in business analytics and big data, where I had the pleasure of meeting you.
Of course, yes. That's very important. Good for
that was a pinnacle, actually. My whole career led to that point. You're retiring now.
You've peaked. You can't do any better. I think you should retire. You're done.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, actually, I did stalk you on LinkedIn before we had this call. You wouldn't have seen it because I'm on private mode.
Okay.
Because I thought it was really interesting that you've been very academically inclined, and the fact that so just to clarify, just to get a sense of all the many degrees that you've accumulated, your undergrad was in civil engineering, right?
It was in civil engineering, yeah.
Did you do a master's after that, or you jumped straight to working?
No, actually, it's funny how it sounds now, but when I finished my undergraduate studies, I actually thought I was never going to go back to a classroom, because I did learn a lot and it was tough. But I felt that I would prefer to gain professional experience. I wanted to go into practice.
Right.
And because I was a bit scarred by the classroom experience, I thought that was enough. But years down the line, already in London, when I originally wanted to become an expert in a construction material, like in concrete.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to do that back at the time to join a group of experts in design. I thought it would be a booster for that. And joining Imperial College was an eye-opening experience. It was very different from university back home.
Right.
It had great resources for research, very cool projects, a different approach to encouraging your interests. And when I started, I thought it would be something, I have to get through this program and get out of here with a valuable degree. But over the course of, I did a master in structural engineering, specialization on concrete structural design. And that was a decade ago. And over the course of that program is when I started developing curiosity for research projects. And eventually it substantiated into a PhD program, But, my mind was changed over time. It was not something immediate.
It was not something that you were initially. Okay, just I guess it's a part of the journey. But I think the more pressing question then is, after all that effort and time put in, you decide to throw all of that out the window and jump into big data. So at what point in your last decade did you fall on your head? And
it's hard to distinguish decades now.
No, but how did that happen? How did you decide that?
Well, to be honest, it's for some people this looks like my first career change, but it's not actually. And because even within the realm of civil engineering, the possibilities that are out there, because in engineering, the thing is, there are very, very versatile career paths. And I've really jumped from one to another, jumping from structural design. It was a time where I was a project engineer, so I was doing, civil projects, right? Highway engineering, hydraulical design, and whatever. So I thought it was worth exploring because, your career span is long enough, for you to kind of have the reassurance that you like what you're doing.
Actually, the career span is it's only decided that you retire at 60 or so, right? You could work lifelong, and if you intend to work lifelong, I think your approach makes a lot of sense. You got to eventually reach a point where you have your hands in multiple disciplines, because eventually they all mash together, right?
Yes, actually, to use a sort of technical metaphor that we were exposed to, it's like the exploration-exploitation trade-off.
Right.
That you can apply to so many things, right? So in this case, when you're looking for your own professional interests, I thought, exploring was definitely worth it. It's worth it when you can afford it, of course. So the massive changes I've experienced within the professional realm that I'm used to, the one that blends with my degree, it's already quite significant. And when I landed on research, I did it comparatively late, because academia is normally populated with people. I know there are exceptions out there, but as a major trend, it's people that has pursued an academic career from the very beginning. So they do undergraduate, postgraduate, with or without master's, PhD, postdoc, permanent position. And I don't know, I have my reservations about that. I would like universities to be populated with academics that do have their share of exercising experience. But yeah, anyway, I'm deviating from the topic. So when I got to academia, I did enjoy that a lot. I mean, intellectually, it's very, very rewarding. Yeah. It's you acquire a set of skills that are hard to acquire elsewhere, because
so let me ask you something there. I mean, so I don't know if you're aware. I don't know if you stalk me as much as I stalked you, but I did my computer engineering. I did my computer engineering as well. But
you're an engineer? Oh yeah, of course.
I have to be. I'm Indian. It's like one of the major professions, the only choice that we have as kids. But,
okay.
But yeah, I did my computer engineering, and to give you a little bit of a background, when I picked computer engineering, I picked it because it would seem like the easiest engineering option at that time, and I'd come out of it with a safety net. And now looking back, I don't think I invested the same amount of energy as I've invested in the big data program, and picked up as much, but I learned as much as I could have. But over time, and more with practical application of my skills and with work experience itself, I've come to enjoy this process of learning. And but more importantly, what I found is the more I learn, or the more variety of things I try to learn, pick up, or I start to learn, there are some fundamentals which hold true, right? And there are some things, if you know, or if you have a grasp on, a lot of concepts in variety of fields start becoming a lot easier to grasp. For example, I was really good at physics, and to some extent maths as well. I had a decent grasp on numbers. Nothing to write home about, but definitely it wasn't too bad for me. But I have a feeling that once you have a clear understanding of these more fundamental sciences, everything else sort of becomes a lot easier to learn, right? What do you think? What's your express opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are as many approaches as people here, but I would say over time you start building a core. You start building a map of interactions that make sense in your mind.
Right.
And then
that's a good way to put it.
So, for example, to illustrate what I was about to get to before, after particularly after the doctoral studies, I already knew by the time I was a postdoc, I realized that the greatest joy I got from my job was the abstraction you make of the process. So you have a complex problem, you formulate something mathematically to tackle it, right? It's normally something you can obviously not solve. There is no closed form solution, which means you need a numerical approach. You need a computer algorithm to process that. That can come in whatever language. So you need to implement something, optimize it if you can, and then get a model for providing solutions, right? And then you make queries to this model, queries to the original complex problem, right? So what I've just described was obviously in my case very much related to the object of study being a concrete frame or a masonry bridge.
Right.
It's complex. There are mathematical theories for their mechanical behavior. There are certain methods that describe them, that's implemented in a certain language. I was used to interacting programmatically with it and then make questions. Why does it behave this way? Where is the damage bound to appear? But then if you actually detach the process from the object, and it doesn't have to be a bridge anymore, it can be, in the most generic case, it's just a set of data. It's just a chunk of complex, potentially unstructured information. Right? And then, it starts sounding familiar, right? There are mathematical ways to tackle it, to programmatically interact with it, to make queries and extract conclusions.
Right.
So once you realize that it's more about the journey than the ship you're in, or, well, anyway, you get the metaphor.
I think I'm starting to see why you never want to do an MBA.
Well, I never said that, for the record.
I think I've seen enough to make that assumption.
Okay, okay.
I think evidence
I'm a great
points to that.
advocate for IE's MBA programs, okay?
You don't want to do an MBA, except maybe IE MBA, which
Of
is
course.
clearly the best out there.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yes, say yes to IE's MBAs. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw like 2 big words at you. All right, are you ready? Try not to get frazzled. If you need a second to process it, take your time.
I'm going to sit down.
All right. Okay. Yeah, please make sure you're sitting. I don't want you to get dizzy.
Right.
Information assimilation.
Okay, I'll show myself out.
But yes, a very fancy way of saying learning, right? You've done a lot of learning. I've done a fair amount in the last year. And I think we have very, very different approaches to this. At least we've worked together on a few projects. I've got to see how you work, and I see. I have a sense of, you have a very structured approach to when you start something or do something. You try to go into you try to understand it almost to a very fundamental core level before you proceed. While I, on the other hand, I like to jump into the deep end and just move my arms till I figure out how to swim, and then I'm okay. And that's pretty much been my approach for all of the projects that I've done in big data. I jump in with like an insane idea, and then I'm dying trying to make it work. But yeah, tell me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's true that I noticed this contrast. We were lucky enough to participate in a Python project, right? And we have different people coding on the same project. You learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
But it's just, yeah, it's true. We have different ways of approaching this, but they're which I think are good paradigms of the main ways that there are to tackle this. I would say you can either go bottom up, right, or top down. Mm-hmm. And in a way, this means, so the way I have to approach this is, it's true, I would like to understand something to a sufficient extent before I start manipulating it. Because I like to, let's say, I like to understand how it's meant to work, why it works, and then adapt it to my convenience.
Right.
This, I mean, it sounds reasonable, and there are situations where this is, I would say, a very advantageous way to go. But I'm aware that, I mean, sometimes I myself, I'm like, I'm progressing too slow for my own sake, Yeah. So I have to remind myself, just, do something with this. And I've interacted with people who have the opposite approach, which, when you're comfortable with it, I think it's very useful. People who feel comfortable moving the pieces of the puzzle and see how the complete picture becomes less fuzzy progressively until suddenly it clicks. So you learn simultaneously as you manipulate, the object of study.
Right.
So I would say, again, there are situations where it really there's a winner. That's the way to go. But probably there are other situations where it doesn't, make yourself a favor. Also, another advantage that comes to my mind is I like to do things so that I can replicate them in the future. I think this is a very important thing that particularly young learners don't usually bear in mind, is you're bound to work in a group. You're bound to interact with people, unless you're a super specialist that only works on their own, right? But people are bound to see your work, and they need to understand it. They need to be able to understand what you're doing relatively quickly. Right. And the best way to do that is if you produce things in a structured manner. And sometimes this colleague of yours can be yourself 3 years down the line. So if you just manipulate something to your convenience right now ad hoc to do the trick, and don't pursue it further, 3 years from now you're going to revisit this and think, what was I doing? So I like to do things, if I can, because sometimes time constraints don't allow you to do so, in a way that I can persist them in memory. When I understand them properly, I remember them for longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But let me try to give you my perspective on like my methodology and
I
why
know
I
you
think.
don't agree with what I just said, but
No,
go
I
ahead.
agree. I totally get it, and in fact, I'm almost jealous that I'm not capable of that because that requires uh, I mean, it requires a different kind of mindset or approach to be able to be that you know uh, consistent or see things through from fundamental. I'm very restless when it comes to when I need to get something done. I need to get it done immediately, and that's why I like to jump in the deep end. And from my perspective, you can go horribly wrong in my method, which I have many times. But I think there are a few things that if you keep in mind or you sort of set as a rule, this method can prove extremely effective and might even be able to capture a few of the things that you just mentioned in terms of having having an approach or being able to replicate it. So the first thing is to see it through. It sounds very simple. It sounds very stupid, but like when you jump in with something as complex, you're gonna be hit right in the face with the most number of bugs that you've ever seen, right? Because you're going in with things you don't understand. You're just jumping in trying to implement something, and then you're going to be sitting and debugging for that's going to be majority of what you'll be doing. But what I find is if you see it through and you start to understand why those bugs are there and you start debugging, and of course, my what I'm quoting right now, this example I'm quoting is coming from say when I'm creating a machine learning model or something like that, because that's the closest reference I can draw right now. But what I find is when you start doing that problem solving, you get really good at like deciding, okay, what are your top priority problems, and you start like these are the ones that I have to fix. But you also get really good at finding out different ways to implement things or getting like something done in a way that probably was never thought of before or was never done before. I
Mm.
think there are merits to both. I uh, i want to be able to do what you do in terms of and the thing is, with my approach, I get a fairly good grasp, good understanding of how to implement something, how to do it, and I'm able to replicate it later on. But I might not know maybe to intricate detail what that program or what that uh, machine is capable of. So
Mm.
I'd say that's the trade-off. But on the other hand, you get things done way faster. That's a major advantage. You get results like immediately, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, there are intrinsic merits to both approaches, and
Right.
sometimes you look with envy the other approach. That's what
Yeah.
sometimes you have to remind yourself that your way to go is not always
Not
optimal.
always. You got to be able to
So,
do. So let
so
me
yeah.
let me ask you quickly. Like, how do you learn something new? I mean, or how do you discover something new? If I let's say I throw a topic at you right now, tell me something you don't know, man. I'm pretty sure you know everything, but
Not
okay, yeah,
even
no, I
close.
okay, I will throw a topic at you, and I want to hear your approach on how you would go about this thing. Do you play games? Do you play video games? I'm assuming no.
No, I used to. I was a big player, but a while ago.
In what sense,
In
Alejandro?
what decade? In what decade? Not this one.
All right, okay.
Um,
I'm gonna ask you to learn everything you can about virtual reality. How do you do this? How do you approach this?
right. So I guess, right. If I were free of time constraints,
No, you
right,
have a
which
time
can
constraint. Let's make it fun. I'll give
I
you a
have
month.
5 minutes, right? I have 5 minutes. So I'm gonna open Google.
I'll give you a month.
um,
A month is a long time. A
a
week.
month is quite a long time.
Week.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would try to find a way to filter what I would deem reliable sources,
Hmm.
as in, I don't know, virtual reality, like a crash course, or um, I don't know. I would try to find out what are the basic tools, what are reliable resources to start with,
Right.
and then start jumping from one to the other until I get my own criteria to filter.
Hmm.
And once I get a couple that I feel are being helpful to me, I will pursue them for as long as I can. But
Right.
if the time constraints allow me, I would still follow the order from A to B, B to C, C to D,
Yeah.
etc. If I feel that the month is too short, then I would try to find out, if what is the minimum functional threshold? Is it F? Then let's try to get sequentially to F. Is
Yeah.
it
I think that,
W? Then I'm gonna jump from A to D and from D to G,
yeah.
and let's hope for the best.
You made a great point there. I mean, I think that's really good when you have to learn something new. It's like to probably set like a immediate goal. I want to be able to do this, say by this time. I want to be able to figure out how to, achieve a certain goal by a certain time, and then just sprint towards it. Like figure out how to get there and how to get that done. But
Yeah.
in terms of like, do you read a lot of research papers or any of that? Given that you come from an academic
If
background,
it's
you're
yeah,
more
if
versed
it
with.
right. Well, I would say this applies to many things, right? If you feel you relate to a topic
Uh-huh.
with one of your strong points, you will try to follow that route.
Right.
So you will play to your strengths. So if it's something more academic or it's formulated mathematically, I will have the proclivity to look for papers
Right.
and read about it. Yeah, that's true. I would be able to help myself.
Right.
If the time constraints are tight, I know I will start, maybe enjoy the first paper, and then say, "Oh, there's no time."
But what's your
But yeah, if I
what's your
can, that would be the route. Yeah.
what's your opinion on consuming or uh, gaining information, learning through your new mediums? Right now, research papers have been there for decades, years, centuries. But what about the new ways of consuming data? These short format videos and short, quick articles and real practical approaches. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, especially with the whole I mean, it's accelerated with the pandemic, but this trend's been there for the last couple of years, where a lot more learning, a lot more consumption of information and knowledge itself comes from these new mediums like videos. And I mean, I've personally learned a lot of things watching YouTube videos or following these tutorials when I need to get something done. Do you think
Yes,
there's merit there as well, or you
yes,
find?
yes. That they have great potential and they're already widespread, isn't it? I have used them myself,
Yeah,
and I think they also fulfill a purpose. You don't necessarily have the time, and not everyone has had the appropriate academic exposure to be in a position to start reading papers.
right.
So it's like if you need time to develop the skills to understand the papers in the first place, then you're following a very unsuitable, path.
Yeah,
So sometimes you don't need to understand the underlying mechanisms. You just need to understand how to operate something to your needs
right.
and to do it reliably. So most of us find ourselves in that situation, at a certain point. So yeah, if I don't need to delve deeper, then I have watched tons of videos, and they
Yeah,
were very helpful to move on quickly.
yeah, absolutely agree with that. In fact, I find that I enjoy also. I've transitioned from reading full books to consuming them in small summarized formats, and mostly in an audiobook format as well. I find, especially when I had that commute, or when I was regular at the gym, I would have this audiobook playing while I worked out. It's such a passive way to consume information, right? And I mean, it's not as efficient as reading it. I think reading, it sticks more. When you listen, you tend to miss out a little more because you are still distracted by other things. But the sheer fact that you have access to this information constantly, I think there's a lot of merit in consuming it in these formats. Have you tried audiobooks, by the way? Do you indulge in them, or not a fan?
Not really. It's not that I'm not a fan. It's like I said before. You have the tendency to strengthen your strengths and to neglect your weaknesses
Right, right.
unless you put a very explicit effort into addressing that. So in
Uh-huh.
my case, I have a very visual memory. I
Right.
remember very well the things I see,
Oh, so
but
then it makes sense for you to read.
I struggle with things I hear.
Mhm.
So and I have been this way since I was a kid. So obviously over the years you start sticking to, you know, reading and watching things,
Right.
and listening to things has never really worked for me that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, if I want to, if it's because it's technical and I need to be focused to understand, or if it's literature for leisure, or, you know, or poetry or whatever, I also prefer to just read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's not that I'm not a fan. It's just that it it's not my main channel.
No, that makes sense. Makes sense. You got to. There's no one size fits all, right? When it comes to learning, you got to figure
Mm,
out what works for you and then run with that. But
yeah,
now that you
exactly.
mentioned poetry, right? Let's move on from these more serious topics about learning and things, and now let's talk about some. Not a lot of people might know this about you, but you recently won the IE Foundation Prize for poetry, and that was fantastic. That was insane. But I couldn't read your poetry because it was in Spanish. But I'm sure it was amazing, and I don't think anyone knew that you had this soft romantic side to you. Maybe. So do you wanna tell us about poetry and what inspires that outlet?
Well, first of all, thanks. Please don't butcher it by using Google Translate.
First thing
um,
I'm gonna do after this.
oh, I figured. Um, yeah, it's true. I didn't share this. I mean, obviously, people that know me from a long time ago,
Mhm.
they know about uh, this side of me in terms of a reader and a writer. I haven't really written that much over the last years, but it was something that I used to do quite a lot. I would say um, throughout my 20s.
Mhm.
I've still do, and I should do more. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the question of inspiration, though, it's a very tricky one. um, because it's something I have given thought to a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I was thinking, you know, it's obviously one of those things that you cannot just define in like two sentences, right?
Yeah.
And it makes sense that it is that way, right? It is fuzzy. You need to approach it via many different angles, superimpose layers of meaning, and then, you know, it is nice that it is that way because it applies to the products that are the outcome of inspiration.
Uh-huh.
So to try to showcase what I think of inspiration, I have actually prepared a small journey, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep in control of it. All right. So let's see if we see it through.
Okay.
Okay. So, for example, there is an author that I really like. I used to read him a lot.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I didn't stop because of lack of interest that he stopped producing. His name is Milan Kundera. Do you know him?
No, no.
It's a
Spanish?
Czech
Or
French writer.
okay.
Um,
What does he write in?
produced
What language does he?
most of his works were in Czech,
Okay.
and at some point, because he migrated to France, he produced some works in French.
Okay. And
Um,
do you know these languages, or do you read the translated, transcribed version?
I'm afraid I read the translations.
Do you feel they transcribe well or translate well?
I would like to think so because I know he's very keen on language,
Okay.
and I think he supervises some of the translations, in
Which
particular the one
helps.
to Spanish.
Uh-huh.
So uh, I'm quite confident it makes it justice. Um, so, for example, this author, one
Uh-huh.
of his French novels is called Ignorance. He produced three, right? Ignorance, Slowness, and Identity.
Okay.
And Ignorance well, he does it actually in many of his works. He interrupts the narrative at some point to introduce a digression into an important topic. And sometimes this digression has to do with a word. It is a leitmotif for the entire plot.
Okay.
Like, and it can be actually an etymological journey,
Mhm.
right? And he dives into the root of a word. And I have to say, I've always enjoyed these etymology journeys enormously.
Mhm.
So let's take, for example, ignorance, right? I have it right here. I know that reading is not particularly podcast amicably, but just bear with me. It will be a very short snippet.
No, please go for it. All yours.
All right. So here it is, ignorance. In chapter 2, he introduces a digression to talk about return. The idea of return is very compelling to all of us. And there may be a reason for that. So here it goes. The Greek word for return is nostos. Algos means suffering. So nostalgia is the suffering caused by an unappeased yearning to return. To express that fundamental notion, most Europeans can utilize a word derived from the Greek, that is nostalgia, as well as other words with roots in their national languages. Añoranza in Spanish, saudade in Portuguese. In each language, these words have a different semantic nuance. Often they mean only the sadness caused by the impossibility of returning to one's country, a longing for country, for home. What in English is called homesickness, or in German, Heimweh. But this reduces that great notion to just its spatial element. I'm going to fast forward here to different snippet. The Germans rarely use the Greek-derived term Nostalgie and tend to say Sehnsucht in speaking of the desire for an absent thing. But Sehnsucht can refer both to the something that has existed and to something that has never existed, and therefore it does not necessarily imply the nostos idea. The dawn of ancient Greek culture brought the birth of the Odyssey, the founding epic of nostalgia. Let us emphasize, Odysseus, the greatest adventurer of all time, is also the greatest nostalgic. Right. You see, this is quite interesting, right?
Very interesting.
And it is actually in the middle of a narrative regarding some characters that are, bumping into each other after many years. Anyway.
But I really liked what that snippet said about when you use that word in the sense that we know of it in English, like homesickness. You reduce it to what it is, like your association with a place, while you fail to capture perhaps the essence or the soul of that emotion itself.
There, exactly. It makes you feel that there are many, many layers.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible.
Around a concept, right? So if you allow me just a bit more.
Please, go ahead, please.
I think my favorite works of him are the essays, right? There's another book of essays called Encounter. And there's one essay in that book called The Untouchable Solitude of a Foreigner. And it is about Oscar Miłosz, a writer. And here this is a very, very short snippet. He talks about a poem of this author that really impressed him in his youth. So here it is. But why this poem in particular? The essential reason, I think, lay in the discovery of something I had never encountered anywhere else. I discovered the archetype of a form of nostalgia that is expressed grammatically, not by the past, but by the future, the grammatical future of nostalgia. The grammatical form that projects a lamented past into a distant future, that transforms the melancholy evocation of a thing that no longer exists into the heartbreaking sorrow of a promise that can never be realized. So this is, the plot thickens, right? He is adding more and more layers to the notion of nostalgia,
right?
Intertwined with return. And so this, you can tell something is going on here, right? You feel compelled, just by the way he describes it. And also return is something that it's very easy that it may mean something for you more than the mere definition of return, right? Particularly if you're someone who at some point left your country, as is my case, is now yours. So now I'm going to stop with Kundera and share something more personal, okay?
Please.
Non-official, non-published, non-academic. So there's a good friend of mine who has a book in the making. Hopefully it will be published at some point soon. And it contains an aphorism that has been very meaningful to us over the years because it's unattributed as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he heard it somewhere or read it in a place he can't remember. And it is something that has become more and more meaningful for us over time. And it goes like this. Past the age of 40, we all start looking like devastated cities. Right. I mean, I know for the young listeners out there, this may mean nothing. Okay. But it is something that actually became meaningful to me, because you see, so here's the thing. When you leave your hometown for an exchange program, right, or even for a formal program like IE was the case, for a sabbatical, for whatever the reason, you can still go to some place and return to your hometown and feel that nothing much has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You return to, you identify the mechanisms of the city, you feel there is no detachment. You haven't lost any reference, right? But if you're abroad for long enough, particularly if you leave with more or less the intention of staying abroad, at some point it hits you that the landscape that you were used to starts losing references. It starts deteriorating a little, and it can be something silly. I mean, I myself didn't give much thought to this, but you know, the city you come from has its like objective geography,
Right.
but it also has a map, a personal map that you have superimposed on it. And then there are certain places which may be insignificant for someone else that are very meaningful to you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Could be a small bakery at the corner of your street.
Exactly.
That's
It
shut
can
down,
be,
right? And then
yeah, it can be a bench in a certain park, right?
right.
Where certain words were exchanged, a secret was shared or heard, or you know, a kiss was given or received. You know, it's very meaningful.
Right.
It can be a cafe, it can be a bookstore, and suddenly, you know, one day the bookstore is now a state agency. You know, the park doesn't exist anymore. The cafe, I don't know, the building was demolished, whatever. These things start accumulating. And then one day, these things come together to a sufficient extent for you to feel that your map is getting emptier.
Right.
And that part of the city that you have in mind, there are certain milestones in the map that now only live in your memory. You've lost the physical reference, right?
Would this be, can we liken this to the nostalgia that you talked about previously, of you projecting a nostalgia into the future?
I'm getting there. I'm trying to use, this is what I'm trying to make a journey out of this.
Oh yeah, so my bad.
No, but good. It means you realize that you're on board. So you on the one hand, you feel, when I reflected on this aphorism, I started thinking, wow, you don't get to devastation straight away. You know, devastation starts occurring because the city that you remember starts losing references. Right. Your landscape loses, the orography is flattening, right? And then you start thinking, you know, the idea of return may be there, but it's not a real return necessarily. It's like you would like to return to the city that you have in your memory, but doesn't exist anymore. So that's why the idea of return is compelling. It is something that is, it resonates with you.
Yeah.
Right. And then what do you do? That devastation is irreversible if you stay abroad. So you need, what can you do to at least ameliorate that effect, right? You need to create references. You need to try to enrich your landscape as best you can. So let me see if I'm going to throw at you the very last quote of Kundera, right? And with this, let's see if we can see if the journey actually was useful or not. This one is his most famous novel. You may have heard the title. It's The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Of course.
Yeah, all right. Here we go. So this is another digression towards the end. It's chapter 23. And it says, we all need someone to look at us. We can be divided into 4 categories according to the kind of look we wish to live under. The first category longs for the look of an infinite number of anonymous eyes. In other words, for the look of the public. Sorry, I'm just jumping forward. The second category is made up of people who have a vital need to be looked at by many known eyes. They are the tireless hosts of cocktail parties and diners. They are happier than the people in the first category who, when they lose their public, have the feeling that the lights have gone out in the room of their lives. Jumping forward again. Then there is the third category, the category of people who need to be constantly before the eyes of the person they love. Their situation is as dangerous as the situation of people in the first category. One day, the eyes of their beloved will close and the room will go dark. Mm-hmm. And finally, there is the fourth category, the rarest, the category of people who live in the imaginary eyes of those who are not present. They are the dreamers. So, for me, the dreamers are the people that are least affected by the devastation, because they don't ever lose references.
Right.
And you see, this journey that I tried to make here was articulated around a notion and a word, like return.
Yeah.
Or nostalgia, that they could be combined in here.
Right.
And so let me see if I can wrap this up. It's complex. So why do you feel sometimes inspired by something? I'm referring to inspiration, not just as a state where you can deliver something, but just as a state where you are sensitive to receiving something. Why does something resonate with you? And I think that is because when inspiration hits you via some words in a verse or some drawn lines on a canvas or whatever, it's because you feel that there is a deeper structure than what you're just seeing.
Yeah.
There is like, there's an enormous puzzle out there, like universal, but in a very local area, you sense that you know how one piece fits. So you feel there is a structure locally. And that's why it feels so compelling. And that's why structural engineers make great poets. Okay, that last part was made up, but the journey somehow makes sense. It's for me, it's I have something similar to this whenever I read something that resonates. I feel that I'm looking at several layers of meaning that are being there behind that specific line or behind that specific curve or color or whatever.
That was incredible, man. That journey was so well put together. Really, no, I'm not even kidding. It's a lot of these notions that at least I know I've had. I've always felt. I think you found a brilliant way, beautiful way of expressing that. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with the poet Alejandro, much more perhaps than the data scientist that I've known. But really, that was incredible. That was such a beautiful way of, especially quoting inspiration itself.
Well, the very fact that it's hard to define it is partly the reason why it's so rewarding when you experience it. And I think actually, sorry, the cherry on top would be for the people, in our class who may actually read the poem in its original form in Spanish, or even the translation, to be honest. That I hint towards the notion of return in the poem as well. So you can see, I hint the notion of return in the poem.
Oh, wow.
So you can tell that it's something that's been on my mind for quite a while.
Oh, wow. I now I need to read it, even the poorly translated version, if I can. Would you Share that with me. When I share this podcast, I'd love to share the poem as well.
I was willing. Soon enough they will release a collection of works.
Oh wow!
The
You're going to be
awarded
published.
works. So I mean, well, it's going to be available in the humanities department website.
Uh-huh.
So I will share it with everyone once it's out there.
All right, cool. Yeah, I look forward to it. I think that's going to be incredible. But
Thanks.
but this is great, man. This is such a beautiful way of taking a simple word that we know we've used, we've all expressed or even felt, but to really create something out of it. Wow, that's incredible. And I think I wanna quickly touch upon one thing you said. The fact that inspiration itself is very complex to explain. But I think that holds true for a lot of the most beautiful things in life, right? The more you learn about it, the more you sort of start grasping the essence of it, the harder it is to explain. At one point, it's impossible to put into words what something truly means. It's a dense layer of concepts or emotions that sort of I'm clearly not doing this justice. So I mean, but I hope you understand what I'm alluding to.
I do, because I feel the same way. That there are certain things that you feel you can revisit,
right,
over time, and the more you expose yourself to situations where you feel you have realized something, you can keep on adding layers of significance. You keep on superimposing layers, and hence the overall shape is never quite static.
Right.
And that's why, this little journey was made based on one notion, one author, and 3 books.
Yeah.
Right. So when you constitute, well, another way to see it is that, if the journey resonated with you, imagine what you could do if you read the 3 books in their entirety and then kept doing this over a bookshelf and then several bookshelves. It's like that's the way in my mind that you create new references.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way you make your map denser. So devastation moves on slowlier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is so true, man. Wow. I'm quite blown away, to be honest. It seems almost impossible for me to segue into something like aliens after this, but
aliens! Don't get me started with that.
No, we come to that, but I wanna maybe dig a little deeper or talk about this a little more in terms of what I really liked is what you said is one word across 3 books. So this author whose name I'm sure I've already which I have already forgotten. If you don't mind,
Kundera. Kundera.
Okay, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to butcher. I don't want to butcher this very smart man. I think it speaks immensely to his intelligence as well. The fact that he's been able to allude to this concept or this essence across 3 books. It speaks to the complexity of each of his works. Then it's not nothing shallow that is a one-time read and then you move on. Rather, there's a theme, a story behind that sort of carries on across his work. Would I be correct in
stating that? Yeah. Well, the good thing about him is obviously there are many other leitmotifs in his works. Here I just took out one thread.
Right.
But the nice thing when you dive into an author that you like and you see consistencies that you can identify the things that really are the core of his creativity. Mm-hmm. Right, and if they resonate with you, you're lucky.
Yeah,
you're in luck because it means you have several books to create your own references and enrich your own layers of the layers of significance that you attribute to what is important to you. Right. Yeah. So anyway, but this doesn't have to resonate with everyone. There are many other genres or authors or languages. I wish I could read him in his original language.
You still can. You have another, good 10 years of life left?
Oh yeah.
You can pick
Yeah,
up, pick up the
but you
language.
know, there's not enough time to what we would like to do. I did start French, to be honest, but then you see we were talking about doing things top down or bottom up, right? So
Yeah.
you can guess what my approach was.
Did you start with
After a
Latin?
while,
If you started with Latin, then I'm gonna have to stop you right there and let you know there's much easier way to learn French.
No. I'm joking. I studied history of the adjectives. No, I'm kidding. No,
But
I was quite practical, but you know, at some point I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm still like asking what time it is. Is it you turn right and then left to ask for a direction? And it's still so far away to be able to read this author in French that at some point it's just faster to just buy the translation.
yeah, it is. But I want to actually touch upon something here which we've talked about, and you've already mentioned. But I feel the same way. What you say about one thing that I'm a little against translated versions is because I have feeling that, and which is why I asked you that question when we at the beginning of the journey was whether it translates well, because I have found that so because of my upbringing and growing up, I've had the option. I know Hindi, I know Malayalam, I know English, obviously. So I've had the option of listening to songs in variety of languages, and I find that a song has tremendous beauty in the language that it's constructed in. But the minute you try to translate it or create another version of it, it loses so much of its charm or its essence. And I find it also makes me think, like, how much are we really missing out on by not knowing maybe 10 languages a person? We're missing out on so many beautiful ways to express so many ideas solely because we're constrained by the languages that we are most fluent in.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, probably when it's about narrative works in a novel or an essay, there's still a lot of aesthetic beauty. But I think a good translator can still convey more or less the entire richness of the original work.
Yeah,
even translators that are facing that, they're also facing, yet again, exploitation, right?
Yeah.
You can actually be like very, very accurate in your translation, inadvertently cutting off layers of significance, or you can try to be partially creative, I guess.
Yeah.
And be less strict, omit and create a little bit so that you are loyal rather than the set of words, you are loyal to the bigger picture.
Yeah, but in that scenario, the translator is no longer merely a translator, right?
No, I guess not.
He is, in a sense, a co-author. Maybe not. I wouldn't maybe not go that far, but
second author, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you truly understand the book, and then you're able to translate the essence, the bigger picture, not just the words. I mean, I think that transcends a mere translator. It's as good as writing the book all over again, right?
Yeah, it also makes it's a great responsibility.
It's a great responsibility,
and yeah, but I wonder, the more compact the format, like for poetry, for example, I find that it's incredibly hard. So
yeah,
I that's when I really wonder if I'm reading an English translation of Rumi, let's say, and I know the original is old Persian. Well, what am I getting here? Is this a photograph that is black and white, fuzzy,
or is it an understanding?
Is this it?
Yeah,
it's hard to tell.
So I've been wondering, like, how by our normal definitions of what intelligence is, your aptitude in maths, your aptitude in certain sciences, your ability to execute certain complex functions. How independently do you think that runs from this whole aspect of creativity of a person? And how much do they collude? I mean, and I should, it's a leading question because I already have an opinion, as you can probably tell. I think.
Yeah.
If I may quickly tell you what my thoughts are on that.
No, go
I
on.
think, and I've given it some thought. And for when I was younger, I used to write plays, and I used to write short stories, and I used to act as well.
Nice.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that
But
doesn't
clearly,
surprise me for some reason.
well, clearly that career never panned out, which is why I'm here.
Oh,
But but yeah, no, I do indulge in. I used to indulge quite frequently, and I've been thinking about writing, going back to writing again. I like that outlet, and I find that right now, before my opinion was those are two different worlds. There's no collusion, and they might inspire each other in some ways, but there's really I'm using two different parts of my brain completely. Was my initial approach to it.
I fully agree with that.
You do? I would have to disagree with that now. I have a
Okay, I
feeling that
disagree. I'm kidding. No. My statement is based on personal experience, but
yeah.
I'll elaborate later. Go on. Go on.
No, yeah. So, I mean, no. Let's talk about your personal experience, because what I'm getting to is that eventually I feel now that the more I learn, the more knowledge I accumulate, and I accumulate a lot of unnecessary knowledge as well. Okay, I know probably too many facts about things that I shouldn't know, but the more I accumulate, I find that it changes my approach to creativity and my outlet and how I perceive a story or how I perceive anything, right? So
Okay.
I find that changes as well, and I find this for me it's now become this complex mash in my head where it feeds off each other, and in a good way. I find that I'm able to leverage both sides to achieve a task that I do. But that's my opinion. I wanna hear why you disagree with me and why I'm ending this podcast right
Well, no, I'm going to mathematically prove you wrong. No, I'm kidding. It's not that I fully disagree. I can admit that you, these outlets can both benefit from a certain state of mind, from a certain mental health, a balanced mindset, etc. So in a way, you could say then that the one could influence the other if one of these ends is contributing to your integral well-being.
Mhm.
This will show in any other feature of yours. But in my case, what I've noticed is, if let's say we were mentioning before research papers. Okay, so let's say there is a research paper tackling on some optimization process for convoluted neural network during backpropagation, whatever. So
Right.
it's embedded quite deep inside one of the algorithms and it's mathematically described. So it needs you to be focused, right? You need to start with describing the framework. You see the equations, you see notation, you get familiar with it, you get comfortable with it, and you start delving, right? Deep. So if I do that, I know that I'm in a certain state of mind that is probably feeding from my rational,
Mathematical, analytical side.
so yeah, exactly. I don't want to explicitly identify with a hemisphere in the brain because I'm kind of out of my depth there, but let's say metaphorically it's that half of my brain, right? So I feel that I can maintain that state of mind for a while, and that's the state of mind in which I would study such a paper.
Mhm.
But if I were to interrupt it, let's say midway, I say, all right, I'm a bit tired, or there's something I want to check out, I'll finish tomorrow. And for some reason, and during that interlude, I start, let's say I want to disconnect and I'm reading whatever. It could be Kundera right here, or it could be whomever. And I don't know, let's say I also pick up the phone, it's you, we talk about return, nostalgia, and suddenly I feel like, you know what, I feel like I can write something.
Uh-huh.
And I start writing. It takes me a while, first of all, and then if I feel that I'm in a position to write something, I know that afterwards, I've experienced this, it's very hard for me to go back to the paper.
Right.
And I felt I mean, honestly, I don't know the reasons for this, but if I've always felt that it's because both tasks are demanding somehow, but feed from very different parts of my brain, and they're mostly disjoint, I would say. So transitioning is not something I can do lightly.
Right.
So I don't know what is the underlying reason, to be honest, but I do feel that I feel more at ease with the notion that they are quite separate.
No, I get that. I should clarify. What I meant was this transitioning. I completely agree with. It's impossible for me to go from a very creative activity to hardcore coding or machine learning immediately. It's impossible. But what I was alluding to is how each aspect, each activity itself, is now it's not inspired by my experience in that activity alone, but inspired by my learnings and knowledge from both sides. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's no longer two separate complete entities when it comes to improving those skills. Rather, they're feeding off of each other. While they do act separately, they feed off of each other in a much more complex manner.
Yeah, I mean, both activities are contributing to an extent that only you will know, right? But to a more rounded mindset, to a more balanced mindset, and that integral well-being has to show up in everything you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, they're totally feeding from each other.
This has been very deep, man. Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for that. I really enjoyed this whole this. When I this was written down in my agenda that we talk about poetry and we'd get into the creative aspect of it, but you really blew my mind with the journey. Sorry if I interrupted it. I couldn't help myself.
No, it was good. It was good because it reinforced the point I was trying to make. So I was a bit scared there. I was turning on my own.
No. I loved it. I was starting to it. Yeah, there were like pieces here and there, but it started coming together. Is what I felt. But I'm going to throw something at you, completely out of this sphere. Okay, no, it's connected. It's connected. It's kind of connected. Okay. But it's gonna throw you for a curveball. Are you sitting down again? Because this is gonna be the next big curveball.
Let me put a cushion.
I'm gonna ask you a very stupid question, and then we're gonna break it down. All right?
Okay.
All right. 1,000 years from now. Okay, no. Let's say 2,000 years from now. Okay, humanity is extinct. We've killed ourselves through nuclear war or some another coronavirus, COVID-25 or something. It really wiped us all out. Aliens whistle. All right, they start doing excavation. They know there was a civilization here. They start excavating certain sites. The first piece of written transcript or written evidence of a civilization that they come across, or a set of these comic books. How much do you think they will take away about our culture from a comic book? Or will it be mistaken for the truth? Will it be, will they think, wow, this was a race of superhumans who were flying about, had these incredible powers, and this is a record of that time?
Wow.
I know your mind is blown right now, but please take a second and try to process what I've just thrown at you.
Right. Well, I'm trying to substantiate the context right here, right? So it has to be a civilization that is able of interstellar travel, right? So it means they are a technological.
They're sufficiently advanced.
Yeah, exactly. Development stage that is a bit hard for us to picture right now. Let's say they got here, then we have to also assume what would be their form of, what would be their structure of communication, or how do they structure their thought, right? Maybe the vignettes of a comic don't mean much, right? We don't necessarily have to share. Would we share language with them, or even maths or anything? Okay,
Maths,
let's see.
probably.
Let's see. Well, would we though?
Well, no, we wouldn't. I don't think so. If they're capable of interstellar travel,
But I
our
don't know. I mean, this is a different, deep question. So,
our fundamentals might be completely different from theirs.
let's say they're close enough so they can, with some effort, try to make something out of the comic. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, on the other hand, they would see a lot of debris and
They see a lot of feats of strength and
I mean, you
powers,
don't know.
unimaginable powers. But the reason I'm alluding to this, or I'm asking this, is because Arthur Clarke said this, if I'm not wrong, is sufficiently advanced magic. No, sorry, any sufficiently
the third law. Yeah.
Is indistinguishable from magic, right?
Yeah.
So it might seem, it just might be an assumption for them that we are so far technologically advanced that we were capable of, and our demise was something unprecedented. But
well,
we are capable. And the reason I'm coming to this is because if this is the case, 2,000 years from now, we already have a mythology. We have books of religion. I'm not going to call out any specific one, which talks of these feats of strength, feats of impossible things that shouldn't be it's not logical in our current culture. Doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. So imagine this expedition landing here 2,000 years from now are actually some sort of pilgrims, right? And the planet is inhabitable again, so they would stay. And for them, if they interpret to the best of their ability a random comic that they find, it could ironically mean that that's what they would think. Yeah, we were some sort of deities that found
exactly right.
That found an end, and then
that would be the next. That would be the next
iteration.
the next iteration of the many mistakes to come. but yeah, I just thought it would be because I've been thinking about that as well. Like we look this. I grew up reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I read the Bible, and I read the Quran as well. Quran to some extent, not I wouldn't say completely. But if you've had a chance to read the Bhagavad Gita, you'll know the stories are incredible, and they're amazing stories. I think for a book, it is incredibly well written, fleshed out, incredible stories, and there are some markings, archaeological markings that are referred in the book and sort of act as evidence of the fact that these things happened. But what is to say that there was not an advanced civilization, that many years back, which was capable of incredible feats, and then they met their demise, and we are the next iteration. Because this is very out there, like I said. Okay, it's a major deviation from the smart conversation we have been having so far. but it's something that I've done some reading to as well, and there are a lot of theories that stay out there that Earth itself has gone through iterations of multiple very advanced civilizations, and we've just come back to like square zero, and we're starting all over again. What do you think?
Well, me, for example, when I was a kid, I was very keen on Greek mythology. I loved the stories, and I think something that is fairly a common feature amongst kids that read this is that mythological figures behave, surprisingly humanly. That they have divine attributes. They're immortal. They represent a certain paradigm, and yet behave in many ways even more miserably than human beings, right?
Right.
So that they're unloyal, traitorous, cruel,
Oh yeah.
And as a kid, sometimes I was a bit surprised. Like, why? I mean, because as a kid, you only give very limited thought to eternity and what it
Yeah.
would mean to live forever.
Uh-huh.
Because when you're a kid, that 20-year-old is already ancient.
Mhm.
So you basically feel you are eternal. So I think that's one of the reasons why these stories are compelling. Zeus is immensely unfaithful, and has a heroic beginning fighting against his father's cruelty, but then becomes a bit tyrannic himself.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I think this could be interpreted in a way from the perspective of your theory that it's they behave so much humanly because they may have been a previous iteration.
Right.
The third law says, if technological advancement is quite out there, it can be regarded as magic.
Yeah.
So
Who's to say, right? I mean, we'll never know. We can make these assumptions and have these theories, but fact of the matter is, this is probably the line you draw from being a crazy conspiracy theorist and have, like, aluminum foil on your wall, is where you understand that we probably have zilch chance of we can have this theory, but there's zero scientific evidence to prove that, or archaeological evidence for that matter. And even if there was, all of it would have been destroyed, eroded away by the centuries, by the thousands of years of just erosion, of entropy.
Yeah, it's obviously it's just that narratively it has so much power.
So much power,
Yeah,
and I've yeah, but
in a way, if you allow me
yeah,
not even a pun, but it would be yet again the idea of return. It's like a cyclic return, a constant iteration of a civilization. And I think that's probably the reason why we feel so appealed by these theories.
right.
Sorry, I was trying to draw a desperate connection with what I was saying before, but
No,
it may
I'm
not
kidding.
be evident.
But now we're talking about Greek mythology, right? So you read when you were a kid, you read Greek mythology, and
Yeah, I did like it.
I did as well. I had a pretty adult book. From now, when I think back, I should not have been reading that when I was 12 or 11. But I realized real quick, man, we've been told such false stories about Greek mythology, because and I think we discussed this, right? Like, take one of my favorite movies when I was a kid was Hercules by Disney. And
Right.
if you watch that movie, Hercules is charming, lovely, and he's the hero that we need. And Zeus is this great god who's just been trapped. Hades is the typical bad guy. But the minute you dig deep and you start reading the stories for what they were, or what they originally are, my God, this just shatters. And there's no going back. You cannot go back and watch that movie again, because Hercules, Hercules was mad, right? He killed his children. He spent many years in hell.
Yeah,
It's
it's true, and Zeus is not he's not
oh yeah,
particularly
Zeus is
pure.
a womanizer, to put it mildly.
Yeah, very mildly.
But yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah, no, go on.
no, it is hard. I did not watch it, although I've always been keen on more modern products that are wrappers around mythology. It's probably I think there's a certain tendency as well. If you were keen on that, it's likely you would like, to some extent, superhero comics.
Right.
Because one is
I mean,
kind
there
of
are parallels to it, right? I mean, it's sort of in the same universe. You're almost.
yeah, you could argue it's a byproduct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but yeah, on the other hand, I didn't watch the Disney movie, but it's well, what can you do? I mean, on the one hand, you have a constraint of who your audience is meant to be.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
If you want to be loyal to the spirit of the original texts, you couldn't make any Disney movie.
You could make any Disney movie for sure.
It's
Probably,
actually hard to make any movie.
yeah, you'd have to release it on Netflix or something to avoid any censorship of the horrors that you'd have to show.
Yeah.
But and then moving on, I want to talk about another thing, which is the fact that you don't have any social media whatsoever. Why? Do you deprive other people of stalking you on Instagram or Facebook?
Well, I do have a Facebook account, but
You do? All right.
I do, but it's pitiful, to be honest. I created it surprisingly a long while ago,
Uh-huh.
and I think I followed a similar trend to many people. I accepted invitations without barely looking into who was sending them.
Right.
Or, well, anyway, as long as there was some sort of vague connection, I accepted. And one day you find yourself with a collection of
People you don't know.
Facebook friends.
Things you don't understand.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly active anyway, but
Right.
for me, that set of Facebook friends already was. It was a bit shocking because I was still just in touch with the few long-term friends.
Right.
The friendships you cherish over the years, and I was like, well, if I wanted to get in touch with them, I never used Facebook anyway.
Yeah.
Which you could, but I never integrated it in my social habits. And at some
But
point I thought, why do I have this amount of Facebook friends when my real friendships are contacted through a different platform? And I closed it for a while and then reopened it relatively not that long ago.
you want to do a shout out of your ID?
To give it another go, but I mean, it was a bit weird because the first thing I did was unfriend everyone and just leave there the handful of people that I would be in touch with for real. And I was thinking, I know this sounds counterintuitive, like it defeats the purpose of social interaction, but I thought I would rather evaluate on an individual basis who I link with. And then eventually, to be honest, I'm still building up the habit of sharing stuff through that platform. But yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know, it's never been fully in me to share.
Which is understandable. It's not, it's not meant for everyone. I want to, like, for example, when I joined Facebook, and man, I was typical. I did everything that I posted. I did because I knew it would get like a certain number of likes, or I would change my profile photo every so often because hey, that was the in thing to do. And I'd try to be funny or try to post something that I thought would get me some attention, because it's a validation, right? You're seeking validation from your peers, and there was always certain social status attached to it. Stepping back now, I realize how stupid that is and how completely irrelevant it is that those numbers should matter. But it did. Like you were talking about accepting friend requests, right? When I started off on Facebook, the thing was people want to see how many friends you had on Facebook, because that number alluded to how popular you were, and it mattered a lot that you had 500 or 1,000 people added on. And I think I still have about 1,000 people or so, right. But that number means nothing to me because 90% of them I have not talked to, I'll never talk to, and I don't interact with. So what do I do?
Yeah, well, if they looked at my number,
but I got
regard this microorganism.
I got to tell you one thing. Recently, I was active on Instagram till last year. Then I quit. Right. And now when I was in Salamanca, after like a year, I posted something on Instagram. And immediately I got like, I don't know, 20, 30 messages on my Instagram from all these people who hadn't heard from me in a while and just wanted to check in, start a talk. And I realized I hadn't talked to so many of these people, and I hadn't, caught up with so many of these people solely because I wasn't active.
Right. Well, something's come to my mind. because this is something I've given some thought to, and this may not seem completely intuitive, but I think we don't own ourselves in our entirety. You see, we make sense collectively, right? Nobody lives on their own completely. So some of our attributes make sense interactively, right? For example, empathy, right? If you're on your own, you never had the chance to show it. And when there are people around you, empathy would belong to that set of features where you are not, where your take on how you are is not more legitimate than the people around you. You don't have a say more than they do. So if people around you think you're not, and you do think you are, it's likely you're wrong, right? So there are parts of your own definition that don't belong to you. So that is slightly uneasy when it first hits you, right? So it means there are certain acts, decisions you make that have an influence on people around you and build up a character, a version of yourself that is out there and with which you have to coexist, right? So you are Gotham, and you have a pretty good idea of who you are, but you have to coexist with the Gotham that people have in mind, which is based on interaction, right? And sometimes these versions may be a bit conflicting. You may not identify yourself with what some people think you are, but it's what I mean with this is this coexisting with other versions can be surprisingly random. And there are several takes on this. One could be, I'd like to, I know it's going to happen. I know there are versions of Alejandro out there that, well, I don't like to see myself in them, but they're out there. So I think part of me is a bit wary of this randomness. I know it's going to be there. So I think a way of measuring my social exposure is to reduce a bit that randomness, because you never know, like a comment that meant nothing to you, or a gesture.
You can read it and associate a quality to that person.
Anything silly, a backhand volley, any to the net.
Yeah.
And suddenly there is a new version of yourself that is out there.
Absolutely.
So also it's like there are these versions of yourself that are out there in someone else's mind. They may evolve with time, right? And at some point, this is also a bit can be a bit freaky, I guess, but at some point you get to die, and the people that outlive you are the ones with a final say, like the versions of yourself that remain in their minds are outliving you.
Yeah.
And that is an important part of what you would call your legacy, right?
Yeah.
And in my mind, I think that is the reason why involuntarily everyone tries to take care of their legacy, or try to prepare, or try to minimize disruptions to what they think their legacy will be, even though by definition it is something you will never see yourself.
You will never see, or you will. I mean, you could control to some extent, but you would probably, most people have limited control of their legacy. Or choose to have limited control of their legacy.
Yeah, you can't live just by thinking what it will be.
Yeah.
So I diverted a bit off topic, but I think so. This is not really legacy related, but I would say this randomness can be a bit cruel. The randomness of the versions of yourself that are out there. So I don't know. I feel that I would rather. I mean, I know it's going to happen, but I'd like to be in control of my interactions.
Makes sense. I think that's a good way to put it. Once again, Alejandro, killing it with your insights.
While I'm in the journey, I'm thinking, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I'm glad it landed somewhere.
Well, I wanna like bring up something that I saw recently,
Yeah.
and I think it'll segue into my next question, which is I don't know if have you heard of David Blaine?
Is
He's a magician.
a magician.
He was
Yeah.
a street magician. He started off doing just card tricks and things like that, but he slowly transitioned to doing these incredible feats of I don't know, surviving is the best way to put it. He
Mhm.
spent 40 days suspended in a glass box uh, in London. He spent 18 hours. No, he spent about 72 hours inside a giant ice cube, just standing. Then he spent 2 days standing on a tall pole. He's done uh, he's done
Wow.
crazy things like this. And just recently, 2 days back, he did a stunt which I loved. I watched it live stream. Is where he ascends to the sky. He starts. He pretty much holds this bunch of balloons and he just goes up into the sky. And he goes up till like 25,000 feet, and then he parachutes down.
Really?
He did it solely for the reason that he wanted to evoke that visual image that we've all had at some point of a kid floating away while holding a balloon. And that was his main goal of doing that activity, is to evoke that visual image. And it
Nice.
was incredible. I thought it was it was going to be bonkers. I didn't even see the appeal, but when I saw it, I saw the live stream, I saw it, and I thought, wow, that's just uh that just it evoked a very strong emotion in me. But this brings me to, I think, what I'm trying to ask, or try to ascertain, to get your opinion on, is in this case, and especially considering someone like David Blaine, what is your purpose as a human being, as a person, as an individual? How do you define purpose? What are we here to do?
Pur- Purpose. Hmm. Again, it's a word that we could spend the entire podcast and not get to a concrete definition.
Yeah, it's like inspiration. It's a very complex. Uh, it's a complex soul. It's not one entity that you could easily define.
Yeah. Um, though, yeah, right. It's also very compelling. So I've tried to come up with something for this word over time, and unlike with return, I've never been quite successful.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing that came to my mind was something rather like a poetic license. Um, you know, when a pianist is by the instrument, right, and
Yeah.
they're tackling a piece, if it's not with public exposure, maybe they're playing for themselves. Maybe they want to test how much of the piece is still in their mind. They just let go and they play the piece. They have a picture in mind,
Right.
but they are listening themselves, right? That's the great difference between a proper pianist and an amateur, right? When you, well, or a modest amateur. When you're a modest amateur, you're too concentrated to listen to yourself. Actually, you're just trying to coordinate stuff in both hands, and um, I was a modest amateur once, and yeah, there was a frequent criticism like, "Do you listen to yourself?" And I was like, "I can't."
What do you
There's too
play?
much going. Um, well, I attempted to play piano,
Uh-huh.
but I'm a modest player, very modest. Um, but what I mean to say is, like, when a proper pianist is by the instrument, they may, they can let go, listen to themselves,
Right.
just following their memory of their
Uh-huh.
fingers, just muscle memory.
Right.
It's in there. It's quite amazing when you think of it, right? The fingers know where to move to produce some very moving harmonies, etc. So what I was trying to extrapolate that and say, well, imagine our body as like an enormous set of muscles is moving somewhere. So what if we're moving based on some long-term ancestral memory, right? Is our body going somewhere? Is it remembering to return somewhere?
You think there's something like
and
a muscle
that,
memory?
that is, yeah, if my body were an entire muscle, where is it remembering to go, right? And for me, that silly poetic revisiting was a nice way to remember where do I want to get to when I talk about purpose?
Right.
Right. It's a dynamic concept. It's related to motion, the consecution of an objective. So the musical allegory kind of made sense.
But by what you're saying, then our purpose is not in our control. There's no free will.
Well, yeah, it's not a perfect allegory.
Right? Because your example of the pianist, if it's muscle memory, he knows it. He knows exactly what has to be done, and it's moving along. He's just enjoying the journey per se, right? Or he's going through the song
it's a
along
very
with the audience.
specific music piece. So if I were to extrapolate it completely, it would mean it's a very specific purpose, pretty pre-arranged for you. It's not what I believe. It's not what I believe. So it's not that I'm talking about some sort of high-level destiny, but it's the closest I've come to think of a motion, of a flow, right? That it's like remember when I was saying you have a very localized sense of how one piece of the puzzle fits.
Mm-hmm.
Is having this notion that you suddenly understand you're moving, and you understand you're moving somewhere, even though you don't see the whole path, right? So that's the feeling of, I feel I have a purpose right now.
I think, in my opinion, purpose to some extent, there is definitely some amount of individual purpose that we have as a person.
Yeah.
And that either comes to us or doesn't come to us, and unknowingly perhaps we have fulfilled it. But I think purpose has more meaning when it's considered in a collective sense, as mankind itself. There has to be, or as a society, you can start putting that together, and I think purpose then starts becoming a little more easier to define, or a little more high level. I think the more granular you go with purpose, the more complex it gets.
Right. So as societies evolve, purpose changes over time as well.
Yeah, I think so. As it does, as it has a ripple effect across us as individuals included. But I wanna tell you about before I forget, my 4-dimensional concept or theory.
This is promising.
Something I came up with, which is going to sound utterly ridiculous.
What's the name of the theory again?
There's no theory. There's no name to the theory. It's just it's not even a theory.
The first thing you have to say is give it a name.
No, there's no name. There's no name. There's nothing. It's just an idea. It's not even an idea. It's just an observation. Better put that way.
The theory. All right.
Okay, better put that way. So I think it would be. Can we safely assume that time is the 4th dimension?
Okay.
All right. For purposes of my example, let's assume that time is our 4th dimension. Right, and there will be multiple. You can number them in any order you want. I think after one point, it won't matter in what order you number these dimensions. But let's say time is the 4th dimension, and so, but given that we are three-dimensional beings, we have no control over a 4th dimension. Right? We merely experience it. We can't manipulate it.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe we have created an object that captures the 4th dimension. Something that all of us have possessed, currently possess, and will continue to possess. A book.
Right.
I'm waiting for your mind to be blown. It's not, clearly.
Okay. Oh.
No, let me explain what I mean by that. I take a very simple example where you have a hero and a villain, a book about a hero and a villain, and towards the end of the book, the villain dies. Right? Now, as long as I have that book, I can choose to be a part of the journey where the villain is alive, or I can be a part of the journey where the villain is dead. So in essence, even though the death itself is a linear event, which is irreversible, by our current understanding, I have been able to manipulate where I want or which part of that timeline I want to interact with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by that like explanation, would you categorize a book as a four-dimensional object? A book is a device capable of interacting with the fourth dimension.
Right. A gate of sorts.
A gate,
right?
yeah.
A gate. Well, again, narratively speaking, is quite powerful. But
thank you,
yeah,
thank you very much. I shall be accepting more compliments now.
Yeah, it's high time for compliments. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, aesthetically, it's also appealing, but still, a book itself, right, is trapped in the same dimensions as we are, right? So it's rather a, how would I say, it's like a meta gate, right? So within our,
it's a snapshot
so within the dimensions that the book shares with us, you can create a mini space-time continuum in its pages, right? So there you are actually free to move back and forth, but externally the frame that cover with 200 pages is still flowing with you, so you still cannot pass the book to your predecessors. So
yeah, that's true. I mean,
aesthetically, I like it. I like it, but
thanks for
the name of the theory perhaps did a disservice, right, to the content.
thanks for destroying thanks for destroying my source of inspiration of today. but yeah, that's definitely something to think about. I've had so much fun having this conversation. It's been incredible. I think we've talked about some. I had a few other things that I put down, but they all seem inconsequential. I think the depth of the conversation that we've had should stand for what it is, and I don't want to, I don't want to dilute it with something else. But this was incredible.
Thank you very much. I was really glad to participate, though I thought it was going to be a very long introduction to finally talk about aliens.
Hey, I mean, this is not the end. We'll do podcast number 2. We'll dig deep into aliens and
Fermi's paradox is there.
Yeah, we gotta get Camila all riled up again.
Oh yeah. She's listening.
But thank you, Alejandro. I'm gonna pause the recording, but please stay on for a bit. But I'm going to end the recording here. So, but once again, thank you for taking this time. It's been an incredible conversation.
No, thank you for having me, Gautam.
All right, perfect.